Hello, everybody. We've got something very special planned for today. I have a guest. This guest is someone that you may know of, especially if you have followed the channel, but even if you have not heard his name, you have almost certainly heard his voice if you have played Fourth Age Total War. He is a voice actor, a writer, a modder, could I say a jack of all trades, but I know him as Master of None primarily. Master of None, MON, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
All right, it's very good to talk to you, my friend. So what I'd like to do here is just have a conversation about Fourth Age Total War. This is a mod that has, of course, been a focus of my YouTube channel and a focus of my my hobby time for quite a long time. And I just realized that I think we're approaching a 20-year anniversary for the Fourth Age Total War. I just looked up when the first installment was released, and this was Corsair Invasion, and that was, according to what I found, 2006. So this coming year will have 20 years of released Fourth Age, and I imagine the mod had been worked on for at least a year prior to that. So I'd love to maybe start off by talking about those very earliest days. So how did you get involved with the mod?
Oh well, this is going to be, some people listening to this probably weren't born, maybe. Interesting little tidbit first. I actually logged on to TW Center. For those who don't know, we used TW Center before you went over to very confusing Discord.
Mm-hmm.
And before that it was Total War, and before that it was I think Strat Command Center or something like that. I logged on to TW Center today, and evidently they must have introduced a new trophy for each year that you're on there, and I got 20 notifications of anniversaries of being on TW Center. So yeah,
Wow,
it has been quite a while.
absolutely.
So yeah, I joined the Fourth Age Total War modding team in, I think it was October 2004.
Hmm.
And this was there was a little small team at the time, and they had some ideas about this and that, but it wasn't really progressing too strongly. I
Hmm.
actually joined to help with the map. That was my initial um, guess expertise or skill. When I say the map, I actually mean the concept of the map, not the mapping coding. And gradually, people sort of, I guess, fell aside, and I eventually, with another guy called APOC, we took over and became um, like the joint lead developers, and we mostly dealt with concept and designs, but then I had to learn a lot of the other stuff as well, because we needed the skills. And so that's how I began. It was just mapping. I just saw that they were having problems with the map. Um, I brought in a little bit of because I liked Tolkien and I knew a little bit about the map, and I'd actually bought that atlas by, I can't remember her name now, Karen Wynne Fonstad or something like that.
That's it.
Um, yeah, and good memory. Oh. Um, and that's how I started, was with really just with the kind of the Tolkien lore, the map kind of side of things. And of course, it was to change quite a lot, but that's how
Right.
it started.
So, and this was 2004. So at this point, Rome Total War has been released, right? But not Barbarian Invasion yet. I believe that would come out in 2005 or so. So you're like working the sort of the concept stages of the mod before you even have the platform that you're eventually going to put it on.
That's right, yeah. And we had to switch over to Barbarian Invasion a little while after that, which I don't really remember was that difficult. But
Hmm.
yeah, so and it was, it was so I can't remember. I think our first release was for Bavarian Invasion. We never actually did anything on Rome Total War itself, apart from a little backport thing I did a bit later on.
Right.
So it was all BI basically.
Yeah, this is it's interesting to hear you say that you got into it from sort of the map or at least the lore standpoint, because that makes a lot of sense. You know, you've always been, you know, for those of you who don't know, I my sort of personal involvement with the Fourth Age team began as a fan, of course. I remember, I think it was probably 2007. The internet tells me that's when the new Shadow released, and that was the stage of the mod that I first saw scrolling on probably TW Center, and I saw what looked like this mock-up of some box art for what I thought was a completely new video game set in Middle Earth. And it
Oh
was
yes.
that, yeah, it was that that shot of like an orc holding a sword up with this sort of green light behind him, and it said the new Shadow, and I'd never heard of this, and I had been a Tolkien fan for many years at this point, and I had to have it. So I think at that point Medieval 2 had been out, and I was just kind of feeling my way around that game, but the new Shadow just brought me right back into the Rome sort of ecosystem, and I just followed it greedily for many years until eventually joining the team as a writer, and that's how I came to know you. But it's, you know, I think a lot of people get involved with mods for those the more abstract reasons, like the, you know, the lore. They like the lore. They want to play a game set in Middle Earth or whatever. But then, as you describe, I guess the longer you wait around, you realize that, you know, you kind of need to get some of this stuff done, and you either have people to do it or you get yourself sort of brought up to speed. And so that's another thing I want to talk to you about, because you really have done kind of everything. You did the voices, right, for almost all the units.
I did voices for more of the units than are now in the mod because they were
Right.
replaced by people that were better than me. But yeah, and I learned how to use the audio things to adjust it and make it better. I'm still in there somewhere in a few places. But yeah, I did quite a bit of that and got a hoarse throat for doing so. It's actually very hard work doing voice acting. I want to back up a little bit. Actually, another reason why I was involved in the mod is because I really fell in love with Rome Total War when it came out, and so I was in that kind of you know, that sphere on the internet of looking what was going on with the game, and because I think for me it was a game that was quite groundbreaking in lots of ways. And I don't know if you, I think you just had this in America as well, but when the engine first came out, they had TV shows of people, sort of teams on TV shows battling between armies, historical battles to see who'd win, and had professors there and people that were, you know, who knew what was going on in historically, and they used that as the engine. And so that was, that might have been possibly where I first saw it. I can't remember because it came out before the game came out. I think they got an early version of the engine or something. So
That's
that's
right.
just another kind of two-pronged interest I had in that sort of came together.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too, because my I was curious about, had you been involved with Total War before the release of Rome? Did you know, had you played like Medieval or Shogun?
Didn't know anything about it at all. I'm very fussy with things like books and computer games and things like that, and so I hardly ever like one or play them or read or whatever. But when I do, I thrash it to death. And so yeah, so that was what happened. I really enjoyed Rome Total War, and
Yeah.
so I was just in that space to see that forum at that time and see that group, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't mind doing that. I didn't have any modding experience, by the way, at all before I joined it. I
Sure.
didn't even know what it was, to be honest. I never heard the term modding.
No, yeah. My exposure to the new Shadow was my first exposure to mods at all. I didn't know what they were either. And it, you know, that it's an interesting period in, I guess, history to me, because, you know, 20 years ago now we can talk about it that way, I suppose. But no one would have had really that much modding experience for Rome, because of course it was a brand new engine. at the time, right? And there was modding for Medieval 1, and there still continues to be people who do projects for it, but there was something, about Rome, not only as a game, but also as a modding platform, a real DIY sort of aesthetic to it, I suppose. Which,
Mm.
have you followed the series after Rome, or is that sort of where you sort of
Oh,
planted your flag?
I planted my flag. My pet peeve with the later engines was I just couldn't get on with the new graphical interface once they changed it, and I was
Hmm.
so looking forward to what playing Rome remastered, and they got all the old things back and made it real nostalgic and that. But then they released it with the new graphical interface. So ah, there you go. So yeah, no, I think Rome and Medieval two were the ones that I have. I have got some I've got two or three actually. I've got Attila and a few others, but
Hmm.
I've never really got into them. So.
Yeah, I'll sort of agree with you there. It's been difficult for me to sort of not to wrap my head around it, but there has been a learning curve element with the later games.
Mm.
But yeah, the remaster, the UI is sort of it's kind of a no go for me as well. One of the big disappointments about the remaster was the fact that it's hard to find things when you've been playing a game for 20 years and they change where information hides.
Yeah, yeah.
So, with regard to the fourth age, one of the things that I found really interesting about the approach, the sort of development approach to it, was from early on, it seemed like the team had a vision for a sort of a staged rollout release, whereby each portion of the mod was released sort of as a separate chunk of the map that would get bigger as the releases came on. So you have Corsair Invasion, I guess 2006, which was, if you can picture like the map of Middle Earth that you're familiar with from the current Fourth Age Dominion of Men. Corsair Invasion was basically all of the south, but it went up to about the White Mountains and the Ash Mountains of Mordor, and that was the northernmost extent of it. Fourth Aer Lingus came out, I think 2007 or maybe later 2006, and then it rolled up to the southern portion of the Misty Mountains to include Rohan and Dunland, and then the New Shadow also used that map, but included the faction of Adunabar, of course, and then with the Dominion of Men, we have sort of the full map. Was that sort of staged, different levels of fullness of release, something that was part of the plan from the outset, or was it sort of forced on you by circumstances and desire to get something out?
It was forced on the group by me. That's how it happened, as I remember. I just thought, if you don't have releases, you don't have the momentum. Look at mods that don't release for a long time, and usually they never release.
Hmm.
I think that was important, and also it gave a sense of accomplishment and a sense of motivation of accomplishing something. So yeah, it was my modular release plan.
Right.
um, and we that was agreed upon, and that's what we did, and I think I'm glad we did it that way. You could argue that it could double. There are obviously some little things you might need, like for example, when you redo the map, you need to change where all the coordinates are of things.
Hmm.
But I think it was that little bit of extra work was worth it in the end. So that's what we did. And just get back to your other question. Yes, I did have to eventually learn just about everything modeling wise. The only thing I think I never did was the 3D modeling
Mm.
software, that stuff. But I think I had
Well,
to go at everything.
there's some very specific tools you need to do that, is my understanding,
Yes,
right?
it was at
Yeah.
the time. I think it's still the case. Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
not, I'm not an artist. I don't, that's not my area. Even though I did do a lot of quite a bit of the artwork, or bits of the artwork in there are mine. I did a lot of tweaking of the textures, some of which were later redone by people that could do them properly. But there's probably still stuff in there. I remember going through a lot of the models, getting rid of the line out of the middle of the face was a big job at one
Oh
point.
yeah. Yep.
Which was even in the original vanilla. And I also did a little bit. I think, oh yeah, I put all those circles and things around all of the around the building icons. I put all those sort of gold things around them and things like
Right,
that.
right.
And I think I did some. I think I might have done tweaks. Some of the artwork in there is still mine, I think, as well. Yeah, I think some of it's still mine. But yeah.
It all has a very coherent aesthetic. So I mean, you say that you're not sort of an instinctive artist, but there was a. I remember when we were finishing up Dominion of Man. I,
Mm.
I did get the sense that you had a sort of a vision for how things you wanted to be, so that they would hang together visually. Um,
Yeah,
so like
yeah,
the buildings needed to all have something in common to sort of give them a unity.
yeah. There needed to be a theme that was just looked the same. The aesthetic had to be the same. Obviously, you've got cultural aesthetics, but because otherwise it looks like, if you're playing a mod and it's set in a certain time, and then you see, you know uh, Roman generals pop up and things like that,
Right.
it breaks the immersion. I think you can break the immersion by having an aesthetic that isn't consistent as well.
Mhm.
And I was quite strong on immersion. I was quite strong on the lore, making sure the lore was always correct, to the point of making sure that anything that was fictional was labeled as fictional, in
Mhm.
the fiction of the fiction.
Right.
um, so that people would know the difference between what we had to create and what was actually from Tolkien's writings. um, and keeping that immersion strong, and just keeping the lore strong, because I think I want to have an immersive experience when I play a game. I don't want to have things that distract from that. So
Mhm.
sometimes I'll be playing a game that's, I don't know, some fantasy game or something, Total War, and I'll win, I'll win, or I'll be in the battle, and it will say something about the Roman Empire, or Christendom or something, and I'm like,
Right.
so I didn't want any of that immersion breaking on any level in the Fourth Age, and so I was quite, that's one of the kind of perfectionist things that we aimed for.
That was definitely a hallmark of the team, and not so much me as a team member individual, but that was very clearly a standard that was set with you and Eridan, and certainly
Well,
Weba as well.
well, I do remember sometimes, because I made sure that you wrote everything in English and not American,
Right.
and
Right.
and and I think you were okay with this, but I'm not quite sure about some other members of the team who weren't from America or England. Is we made sure we use yards and not meters.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, so it was just keeping that immersion going.
Yeah, and I remember too in the buildings, like when you talk about the fiction within the fiction, there's of course Tolkien wrote so much about his world, but when you sit down to try to make it a gameable space, you realize that there is a lot that needs to be added, and so for the sake of the map of Fourth Age Total War, there are, of course, many settlements that have no correspondence in the
Yeah.
legendarium that Tolkien actually wrote. And so you very clearly had marked those out as these settlements were added for gameplay and have no basis in the lore, but these
Mm,
ones do. Here's what the name means in Sindarin.
mm,
Here's where it came from. So I think immersion was always a point that very
yeah.
much impressed me as a player in the game.
I think actually one of the most I've got some highlights of things that I liked the most, obviously, and one of those things was the naming of all the well, to some extent, all the character names, but also the settlement names, because we had to go through, and APOC helped me with this. We had to go through and make sure that everything was in Sindarin, apart from the ones that weren't. That makes
Right.
sense. Uh, um, which a lot of them are Sindarin. But we also had to make sure the Sindarin sounded like the culture. So those
Right.
Sindarin words in Harad, they're all Sindarin. and
Right.
yet we had to make them sound like they were. You had that flavor of the 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 real world culture it was based on, of kind of Arabic or whatever it was, and so we had to. That was that was quite a challenge, but yeah, I love
It's
doing that.
it's yeah, it's a fascinating sort of intellectual creative exercise because you're right. You've got this what seems like an insurmountable constraint. Like we've got this language that Tolkien invented, in the 1920s or something, and it's for elves, right? And it's based on there's a bit of Welsh in there, there's a bit of Finnish, I suppose. There's all these other elements that went into his Elvish languages, and now we've got to use it to name desert languages, and it has to sound kind of Arabic, right? So if you look down at Umbar, you've got well, Umbar is one that I think within the lore is not actually Sindarin. I could be wrong about that, but you've got like Adabara is a name of a city in Harad. Is a name of a city in Harad. Karas Agar, right? A lot of these places do have this feel like from an American perspective, from an English perspective, that seem appropriate to the world, how at least how we imagine it, kind of
Yeah,
filtered through. So
yeah,
that very fun. So
it was fun.
another
Yeah.
thing about the mod itself is that the setting, when the team was first getting together and coming up with a mod for Middle Earth, had there been one before? I think there was for Medieval Total War had a Middle Earth themed mod, but was there a Middle Earth mod in Rome at the time you guys started developing Fourth Age?
I think we were the first one, but there were others that were very close. There was a Middle Earth Total War, and
Mm-hmm.
there was a the Lord of the Rings Total War. Now, the person that created Lord of the Rings Total War was originally on our team and went off to do that. Um,
Ah,
and I've forgotten
and
his
so
name. But yeah, so and then someone took over from him. Um, but I think we were the first, as far as I can remember, because we were really early. I mean, we were before, even before I joined in October. I think a few months before that, they'd started the team up, and that was shortly after the actual release of the game. So,
And so the do you remember being part of the decision to set the mod in the Fourth Age specifically, or was that already settled by the time you joined?
um, I don't I don't think there was much settled in any. I think we decided that when or after I joined. I think it was pretty generic before I joined. I don't think there was anything like, well, we're going to base this on the books rather than the movies, or we're going to do this. We're going to. I think it was pretty generic. They had I might be remembering this all wrong. So if someone's
Hmm.
still around, but I think they had a generic map and they had, I think, some units done. Um, and I think it was all pretty generic though, as far as I can remember. I might be remembering that wrong. That's quite a while ago.
But the that conceit, I think, is just a brilliant one. Again, speaking as someone who is not involved in those decisions at all, so I'm not tooting my own horn here. The idea to set in the Fourth Age really opened up so much from the perspective of a player, especially as someone who may be concerned about having an unhistorical outcome in a total war game, right? And so setting it in the Fourth Age after the War of the Ring at first seems to be maybe the last thing that anyone would want to play because, well, everyone knows the War of the Ring, right? But when you think about actually representing the War of the Ring itself in Rome Total War without scripting, which, by the way, is another sort of hallmark of the Fourth Age, it goes very, very light on the scripting.
Yeah,
It'd be
didn't we,
impossible.
yeah, we didn't want any background scripts because they can slow things down, they constrict you, they can cause crashes, and I was just entirely biased against them.
Right.
We do have a campaign script which sets up the things, but it doesn't continue running after the start of the game. And
Right.
actually, I do remember now actually that I remember looking into the new Shadow. Uh, so I think we did come up with the fourth age after I joined. I'm yeah, I think it was after. So yeah, it was definitely. I think it was after. So and I agree. Yeah, because you've got a more open world to, you're not restricted to the scenario of the storyline. Um,
Right.
if you
You can
say
have
in the
you can have almost anything happen, and even there are a few constraints, right? Like lore wise, in the sense that Rohan and the Reunited Kingdom are meant to be allies
yeah,
forever, and there are just a few things like that. But I think that the team overall managed to find a way to accommodate those within the constraints of the system, which there is, maybe it's a particular kind of person who is drawn into this kind of puzzle. But modding, seems to, it forces you to work within constraints that are not of your making or desiring. But when you can find solutions to those problems, it can be extremely satisfying, right?
yeah.
Um,
The problem solving was actually something I really got into because I was probably most known as a coder,
mhm.
and I really got into that. And one of the reasons for that was just this. They were, at the time, and Aradan sort of kind of just missed this, and I think he's a bit upset that he did. But I was involved with all the early pioneering of it, and it was just so fascinating. All the top modders or coders would communicate with each other and do all these research and do all these things online, and it would be really so interesting to find the answers. And I
Mhm.
seem to have a bit of a knack for it, so I often found the answers, which boosted my ego. And it was just such a good time to be in modding at that time for that engine, because we were discovering it and working out what it could do and what its limits were. And some of those discoveries did come quite a long time after it launch. But in the early days, that was just another. That's one of those highlights. That's the second highlight of what I enjoyed doing as a mod.
Right. That that sort of period for me, and maybe it's nostalgia, right? I'm looking back 20 plus years ago now to the late 90s, the early 2000s seemed to me like a peak period for like gaming, like computer gaming in general, and modding in particular. And I think with Rome Total War, the modding is so interesting because it is very accessible. On the one hand, it's largely text files, right? And moving things around in folders, you can get a lot done actually.
Mm.
But there's also a lot of depth, and there's a lot of tricky things that you need a lot of more technical chops, I think, to sort of understand, certainly more than I can. um, you haven't followed the other games, but do you have any sense of like sort of modding as a trend in the Total War series over time, over the past 20 years? Anything you've noted in sort of the modding landscape that you haven't been involved in?
I haven't been involved, but just from comments, I get the impression that it's harder to mod the more recent games. I
Hmm.
know that even Medieval Total War had quite a period where you couldn't, I think, you couldn't create 3D models or buildings for a while until someone cracked it. But
Huh.
I've just heard from other games later on that there are other things that are harder to access. I think one of them, I can't remember, was it like a tiller or something like that, that they couldn't change the map or something, or they couldn't change the map or they found it hard to do that. I don't
Right.
know. I haven't really followed it. I've just seen little comments while I was before I kind of finished my final retirement, my 3 or 4 time retirement at the
Right.
moment.
Yeah, I think that's true. With I think the mod is Dawnless Days. Forgive me if I'm getting that wrong, but there's a mod for Attila in the works for it's a Middle Earth mod, and I believe the setting is the Third Age, right? I think it's War of the Ring.
Mm.
And there was early on, they had a lot of wonderful units, and it looked very interesting. But there was, I think, a challenge with cracking the campaign map, and I think they've done it.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly how that was done, right? Because I haven't really followed it. But that's one that I'm curious to see how it goes for sure.
Yeah,
There's
I guess
one. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying. I guess the point is if it had become more modding friendly, the game as it went on, then that shouldn't have been an issue. So it seemed to have gone
Right.
backwards if it was finding it harder to do those things. So I don't know if I've heard people complain that that they're not so modding friendly as they were in the way they create the game. But as I say, I haven't really followed it since then. I haven't really played much, and I actually didn't play very much before Rome Total War came out, and because
Mm.
my gaming was mostly in the 80s. That's how old I am.
Yeah, right.
So,
So did you get? Here's the thing: like it's the sort of the modder's curse, right? Like you have this idea of a beautiful game you want to play, and then you spend like what feels like a significant portion of your life working on it. Did you ever get a chance to sit down yourself when at any point during the various releases of Fourth Age and sort of enjoy a nice relaxing campaign?
not really a long one. I and often played it on the, you can put I think is it Run AI or something like that, and you
Hmm.
just do the campaign automatically just to make sure it works. So there was a
Right.
lot of that. I didn't really probably sit down. I Since it came out and I kind of retired, I did have some good games though. I did play it quite thoroughly, and yeah, and enjoyed it. And so it was. But yeah, when I was playing it, and you do have to play it to some extent to test it, but it was always with that in mind, I suppose, testing it rather than chilling out. Um,
Right. I think that's the thing. I've always seen myself as sort of a player foremost, rather than a modder. So it just seems so sad to me to think of someone who, but that's part of the fun, I guess, modding, right?
well, you make sacrifices as modders, that's right.
Right, right. You've also done a couple of other big mods that have really sort of caught on. Some of them have acquired what is sometimes called cult status. This would be the one I'm thinking of is Viking Invasion 2, which was another big one. Basically, what happened with me is as soon as I devoured the new Shadow, got super into that, and then realized that a lot of the same people or some of the same people who developed that also did some other mods. So Viking Invasion 2 was one of those, followed by Norman Invasion, which I think goes under a lot of people's radar, but is a really interesting mod in and of
Yeah,
itself.
yeah,
And
and
that, yeah, go ahead.
the I forgot what it's called now. The Irish one.
Yeah, Gods and
um,
Fighting Men.
that's it. Gods and Fighting Men. It's named after a very famous book. Yeah, those were all my own. We didn't. There wasn't a team that decided to do those. I just decided to do those of my own
Mm.
accord and some help and support. Um, and those are real fun to do. I think the Viking Invasion 2 one was just to bring back the. I think I how did I play? I must have played it by then, and I wanted for nostalgic reasons to put it onto the next engine. And of course, also you've got all the pre-existing graphics. Well,
Hmm.
though of course the problem was what I didn't realize at the time is the graphics in a completely different format, and it was a nightmare to convert them all. It was one
Oh,
of the biggest tasks. So,
wow.
so I think probably everyone that's used those graphics ever since in any other game has possibly used my ones that I converted. I don't know because it was a pain. BIF files, if I remember correctly,
Yes,
something like
that's
that.
right. So the images for the buildings and things, right?
Yeah, just totally won't work in the next engine along. Yeah, there was a sort of weird tool and weird things you had to do to convert them into TGAs, and
Oh.
yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare. But that was so fun, and of course you had the music, and that was
Mm.
just so fun to bring it into. And I know people have done that now. I've seen someone's done a kind of a barbarian invasion on medieval Total War and things like that.
Oh,
I think
interesting.
that's yeah, it's good to those mods were quite. I think I called them small mods or mini mods. Although I guess they are full mods in their own sense, but
Oh,
they're not as
absolutely.
robust and as complete as the fourth age, which is a whole other level. But they
Right.
were things I wanted.
It's so funny though because I've spent so much time playing Viking Invasion 2. Like I will not stand for you to call those not full mods, right? These are what was I doing
Well,
with my
relative,
life all those years?
yeah. And Norman Invasion again, very. I mean, obviously, I'm from these isles, and so dear to me, and I had some fun with the old Norman dogs and things. So.
Right.
But yeah, so it was yeah, it was just a interesting thing for me to do. Actually, as of the making of this podcast, the in this country, I think in a week's time we're getting the drama of new TV drama of Harold and William. So we're going to
Really?
see what that's like. Yeah, it's coming out next week, I think.
The Norman invasion, one of my favorite things about that is just the beginning scenario where if you're playing as the Normans or the English, you've got a massive, it's like a dozen stacks sort of on each side, like the Hastings battle essentially. And it's I'd love your thoughts on that. How was that sort of developed? I'll have some shots up here maybe playing in the background so people can get an idea of the scale of this thing. But
Yeah. Well, obviously the beginning is trying to replicate the reality of the history, with loads of peasants behind. And I always think of that story as really tragic, because Harold had, beaten back the Harold Hardrada in Stamford, and had rushed down. And some say that he was too quick to he was kind of ahead of the kind of peasant part of the army, and if that hadn't caught up. Some say that a couple of earls betrayed him and didn't send their forces, and you just think, just almost on the turn of a flip of a coin, this whole culture was changed. So it's quite a big thing in England that you have that that point. The only time we've been invaded successfully, and so it's kind of in the national conscious, I think. So I
yeah.
wanted to do something and sort of create that, and just so people could play it out, and so that the Saxons could win. um yeah, so, and actually, funny thing is, when I play that game, after after saying all that, Viking Invasion, both of them actually, that and Norman Invasion of Viking, I have a tendency to want to play the Welsh for some reason. I don't know. I seem to
That's
have a like
interesting.
the Welsh. Yeah, I don't know why that is. I think what it is, there are some factions you're drawn to. Now, you're not going to like me saying this, but
Mm.
I have hardly ever played the rune in Fourth Age Total War.
That's
Uh,
understandable.
I don't know. It doesn't. That doesn't. It doesn't attract me as much for some reason. So we definitely have our favorite. Now you probably guess what my
Yeah.
favorite one is. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's just with some that we don't feel very. I don't know. It's just. I guess one of the things is I felt maybe that Rune that were a little bit too similar to the barbarians in Barbarian Invasion Vanilla,
Mm.
and so
Hmm.
I kind of thought I want something that's different from that. So I don't know, but that's the one I probably played the least, is the Rune faction.
Well, I gave
Um,
them plenty of play testing for you, so they're
thank
covered.
you. You did.
But yeah, I think that's playing the Welsh in a sort of Norman invasion themed mod, or playing Rune in a Middle Earth themed mod seem kind of similar impulses to me, right? Like there's an attraction to what's the faction off on the edge, that maybe doesn't get the spotlight very much, and so
Yeah.
I'll play that. But that opening in Norman Invasion is so good, and if any of you listening here love Fourth Age and like that kind of gameplay, I will say about all the mods we're talking about here, there is that consistency of sort of the battles play out in a reasonable way, right? In the sense that they're a bit more slow paced, more reasonably paced, I would say, than the vanilla Rome Total War balancing, and that Hastings scenario and Norman Invasion in particular is just very interesting, because playing as the English, you can almost win. Maybe someone better than me can kind of win there, but the best I could do was kind of retreat to my strongholds and try to eventually whittle down the Normans and then beat them. It took a very long time, but it's incredibly satisfying. So it's always just been a shock to me that you managed to balance that games so well when I think a lot of people would say, okay, we've got a Battle of Hastings, so get two stacks, right? Put them next to each other and call that a day. But when you had so many units all over the southern half of the map, and yet it still works, very
Mm,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. Well, I just I tried to get it right as I could. Again, it's not as finely tuned as Fourth Age, but hopefully it's tuned enough so that you have that experience of it. And actually the Gods and Fighting Men was kind of a little bit different in the sense that it was quite kind of restricted and scripted in some way. So it's and very
Right.
very focused. So quite different from the Fourth Age in that respect because it was following a certain scenario, something that was followed a certain path of history or it's a history
Right.
legend and myth. So that was quite different as well for as an experience to mod and to create. I'll tell you a funny story about that actually. I
Hmm.
really loved this piece of music and I wanted to have it in it. And it's called The Blood of Cahulin. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's played in a film called, what's it called? Is it Boondock Saints or something? Do you know that one?
I know the
Um,
film, yeah.
yeah. And I think they play in there. And it was created by these two brothers. They're Hollywood composers. I think one of them's died now. And I think they're called the Danners or something. And I just flicked off an email to them thinking, can I use this in my game for free? I don't, because I really like this piece of, so I'm making this mod. And one day I get a telephone call from Hollywood,
Wow.
and Jeff Danner or Michael Danner, I can't remember which one it was, is on the telephone to me. Okay, so there was some interesting experiences as a modder, and
Wow.
we did always try to get permission for music in the Fourth
Hmm.
Age that wasn't um, that wasn't freely in the first place. So to make sure, that's why I was a bit wary of people saying, "Can we use your music?" Was like, well, not necessarily because we got permissions from other people to use it. Um,
You
so
had a sort of a very strong culture of we ask permission for art, for music.
yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't like it because sometimes people would take things from our from our mod. I saw some mods where they had actually got some of our fictional settlement names. They'd taken them and used them in their mods. And I saw another one where so we commissioned someone to do a map painting, a few map paintings, but one of them was to do the city of Umbar. If you
Oh
do you
yeah.
know the one I'm referring to? And
Yeah,
they
it's
created
a
that
loading
for us.
screen. Yeah.
I think it's the loading screen, and I think it's also might be in possibly be in one of the buildings. But I saw that in someone else's mod, and I said, "Oh, you don't have permission to use that. We asked," and they took it out. But yeah, there
Wow.
is a culture of people using things, and sometimes that's okay. But so there are some things where you've asked permission and other people don't, or you've created it and they haven't asked permission from you. So
Right.
I don't mind too much once the mod's years old or whatever, but you still got those original permissions that you can't grant because they were only given to you. So
Right.
yeah, we were strong on that. We wanted to make sure everything was we wanted to make sure everything was legal and of course
Yes.
above board and everything, but with the caveat that it was probably totally illegal to make any Lord of the Rings mods at all
Right.
because so but you know, so it's I did see someone who made some Lord of the Rings products and things, and they got um, told to desist, and then they had to change all the names and everything to get
Mm.
away with making a parody of it. And it was very silly, very silly
Wow.
names and things. But technically, yeah, I guess it's all copyrighted, isn't it? But um, you know,
As long as we're not trying to make some money off of it, right? That's my
well,
my
that's
understanding.
probably where they come after you, yeah. So, but yeah, so it was just that's the only mod actually. I think because all the others are historical, based on legends and myths and things, and most mods are, aren't they? I guess in the end they are based
Right.
on a lot. Majority are based on history. But
Right.
yeah, that was those mods were just all a lot of fun for me, and I just really enjoyed doing them. Enjoyed seeing people enjoy them. Some of them got onto the into magazines and onto cover discs and things on magazine computer magazines, and that was good to see them there. I think Viking Invasion 2 was one of the ones that got on there.
I
Um,
think you're right. I remember seeing that passed around the forums, like, "Hey, check out computer or PC Gamer or something like that."
something,
Had a
yeah.
story. This is very cool stuff. Now, I mean, one of the things that's interesting to me about these projects that you've seen to completion is that you have seen them to completion, right? This is not something, as you well know, that is very, very common in the world of modding. It's great fun to come up with an idea for a mod and do all the research for it, but it's a lot harder to get it to the end phase. So, is there anything in particular that you sort of think
Well,
has been helpful?
I mean, I'll preface this by saying that I was obviously a bit older than the average person that was doing this. So,
Mm.
maybe if I was just, in my school years or a bit later, and I would have given up as well. But yeah, I think there are some principles, and one of them is that you have to, when you start a mod, you say, okay, am I willing to do this on my own? Am I willing to do this alone and get it done? Because you might have to. As you say, I probably learned 80% of what needed to be done myself in the end. But also, I think if you have that commitment, other people are more likely to join your team and support you. I'd also recommend joining a mod team before you decide to create a mod.
Mm.
Um, you want to see how it works and get a little bit of skills. Now, I didn't become mod leader just straight away. I was in the team for a few months before that happened. Or you might want to, be in a team and then go off and do your own mod. But um, and sometimes you saw people sometimes wanted to do their own versions of mods and things, and you had about 5 or 6 different efforts to create mods that weren't too different. And I thought, why not? Why don't you just all work together and,
Right.
make the same mod? But yeah, I'd say you've got to be willing to do it on your own. You've got to have that kind of mindset. And a lot of people bite off far too much. If you take
Mm.
that modular approach to creating the full, you can have something to show for it. If it had all collapsed and we'd never come out with the fourth age, we still would have had Corsair Invasion and the others.
Hmm.
And so I think not biting off more than you can chew. And I see that all the time. I'm going to create this huge map, and I'm going to have 20 factions, and I'm going to, and that's a horrendous amount of work. I try to work out how many hours I put into the fourth age over about, I think it was 2004 to 2008, and then I stuck around for another couple of years. I think I totaled it up to about 10,000 hours.
Wow.
So it's a lot of time, and you know you won't put that much in if you're not the mod leader, or if you're or if you're not as insane as I was.
Right.
But it is a lot of time you have to get into those to get those things done, and a lot of it's obviously not seen and behind the scenes and everything, but it takes a lot of hours, and you've got to be really committed to it. And I don't think a lot of people are going to be able to do that if they're needing to work a lot, or they're needing to do a lot of exams, and or
Mm.
their health's not too good or whatever. You do need to be quite committed if it's a large mod.
Right. Is there one sort of aspect to modding that you think is sometimes like undervalued? Like, there's obviously, your skill as a coder. There's the graphics. There's the battles. There's the map. There's all these other aspects, of the mod. But is there something that you think is kind of not given as much importance by people, or maybe even by the fans, not necessarily modders, but things
Well, of
that
course,
help? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, of course, the writing is very important,
Oh yes, of
and
course.
I I would have done that. I would have had a lot more work to do had you not done that. And I must say, you did an absolutely brilliant job with the writing. I couldn't have hoped for someone to have done a better job. You really did excellent. And even though the occasional U slipped out of color or whatever it was,
Right, right.
it was, and it was, and I think that's so important because how many times do you start a mod and okay, I'm a bit critical, a bit harsh now because I realize some of these people that are creating mods, English isn't their first language,
Mm-hmm.
but it is quite, again, immersion breaking when it's not written well or when it's bad grammar and bad spelling and things like that. It kind of makes you think, well,
Yeah.
if the writing's not good, what's the coding like? Am I going to play this game? Is it going to crash? Am I going to waste my time
Mm.
uh, to accomplish something only for it to explode and never never be able to get to the end? And it can put you off the experience if you see that, because you would think, oh, if the team are trying to be thorough and professional, why is all these spelling mistakes, why is all this, so I think writing is something I don't see kind of, or didn't see highlighted as a big thing really, but it's a lot, and as you would know, there is a lot of writing to do. Did you work out that you would have written a novel or something if you put all the writing
Yeah, I think you did. I think at one point
together?
in because you were around, so you quote unquote retired, what, 2008 you said, right, from modding.
Yeah, then again in 2009, and
Then again, yeah, exactly. So you had several retirements, and then you would sort of come back and sort of be the modder emeritus, or however you say it, who we know sometimes at the very end, of Dominion of Men, before Webba joined, it was Eridan, me, you, and then Aoral was there as well. But there weren't that many people. But you were always sort of around to sort of give advice and do things. You actually did a lot of work after your retirement for us. But I think you did. I think you tallied up, and one day you told me, "Count, you've written a novel." Like, I don't know what the number was, but I thought, okay, great. If I if I could only channel this into one sort of continuous project. But there is kind of a shocking amount of writing to be done,
Yeah, and I think, just to speak to Aradan for a while, something he did that again's not always recognized is balancing, like
Mm.
the balancing of the units, and the general balancing overall. That's quite important as well, because if you feel it's unbalanced, and again it breaks that immersion.
Right.
Why have 20 horsemen just killed my 80 spearmen, sort of thing, and it
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't feel um, realistic. So that's another issue, balancing. And Aradan was very, very thorough. I mean,
Oh
with,
yes.
with with those sort of things, and he done his coding of his the text files and that all had nice headers on explaining what everything is. So he just did a great job, and yeah, he did a really, really good job. And so that's again, that can be an unseen thing. I know that's obviously an unseen thing, but I know writing is actually there on the screen, but it also can be something that people don't think about. So those are some areas I think the people need to realize when they're modding as well, realizing that are you willing to write a novel as part of your
Right.
your mod, and again, you see the vanilla left in there for things like that, and it can be so off-putting. I find it so off-putting when you have these references to things that don't exist in your mod's world, that exist in the vanilla world, and you think, what? And yeah, so I think you need to be thorough about those things. And
I do
yeah,
remember you were always good to point out an instance where a voice line had been left from Rome Total War somewhere in the mod. The gods have abandoned us, or something. Something that the soldiers would cry out in battle if like a wall was breached or something. And we
yeah.
kept thinking we had gotten all of these, right? Like, and then there would be another
Another
one
one would pop
referencing
up.
Jupiter.
I know, and it's. I think one of the things with those is it's not always very obvious from the files what it is, and so they can slip through the cracks. And we found them probably fairly late in the game, didn't we? Some of them, and I think we got them all now. I've never heard one since, but
Right.
yeah, it was one of those things that took a little while.
If you have, if you are, and anyone listening runs into anything immersion breaking like that in Fourth Age Total War, I'll have Master of None's personal contact information in the description of this video, so you can let him know.
That's right. Yes, because I won't sleep. No, it's in there. I won't sleep. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap this up here a little bit, because since your retirement from modding, of course, you've been onto some other creative endeavors, right? Like, so you, of course, did a ton of writing for the Fourth Age, and you've done some other writing projects yourself. So would you mind telling us a bit about those?
So I guess from when I was quite young, I had an interest in creating things, and that involved. I did actually do a little bit of like creating text adventures and things like that when I was younger. Um, but also I used to write and like to create stories. I guess it's all really the same thing in the world. In a way, you're creating a world, aren't you? And people can immerse themselves in that world. So I've been focusing more on my writing since my fiction writing since I left the Fourth Age, and I'm not extremely prolific. I find it very I maybe I'm too much of a perfectionist, and anyway, but I'm not as prolific as some people. But I've been publishing some various forms of ebooks and paperbacks and some audios and some free serials you can read, etc. I mostly write, you won't be surprised to anyone to hear this, I mostly write kind of fantasy sort of leaning things. Tends to be non-classical, based on like non-classical folklore myths, etc. So
Hmm.
not Roman or Greek, but more Celtic or Norse. Actually, I think the last fantasy book I wrote was Slavic. It's based on Slavic mythology.
Wow.
So, which has become a bit of a thing, even though it was not a thing a few years ago. I guess because of the old, what do you call it, The Witcher, things like that.
Right.
So, I've also written in other genres as well. I tend to be quite. I've got a goal of trying to write a book in every genre. Well, within reason. So I've recently published a science fiction novella, which is the first of a three-part novella, which will be a novel in the end.
Wow.
And it's kind of like a space opera. And
Nice.
yeah, I've been doing that for probably pretty consistency from about 2011, but then I had a bit of a gap, and then about the last 2 or 3 years, I've been trying to ramp it back up again, and I've been releasing more stuff. So that's something I enjoy to do quite a bit. So
Do you find that do you think you could have done it while you were modding, or just no, absolutely not?
no, I'm a very single-minded project sort of person. I can't really do two things at the same time.
Mm.
All my mental energy was in the modding when I was doing it, and so it was very difficult to do anything else. If I'd been doing education at that time, I would have struggled. I don't know how people do multitask. I can't multitask to save my
Right.
life. But yeah, so no, I've had to focus on these things more exclusively, and it's just the way my brain works, I think.
That makes sense. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time. It's been great to talk to you, because we haven't spoken in person for years. Not since the mod was being developed. I think we did a voice chat once, maybe. But
Yeah,
this is
we did actually have a couple of we did actually have a podcast stopped running for when he went for about 3 or 4 episodes, I think. Well, that might have
Really?
been just before he joined. Yeah, there was a Fourth Age podcast, and that was run by APOC, and but yeah, that went that disappeared because APOC disappeared, and we never know what happened to him. But
Oh no.
that happens with modders; they sometimes just disappear.
Sure.
He was very much into Tolkien, though. So yeah, yeah. If anyone wants to follow my um, writing or anything, I'm on Substack as dmandrews.substack.com. So
Great.
that's where you can look me up. And so I'm doing it all for free on there. So you know it's all free stuff. So um, come along and subscribe if you want to. There's no reference. There's no talking about modding though, and
Right.
anything. Although I did get a little bit into Skyrim, and I've and I didn't get into the modding of Skyrim, but I got into the playing the mods of Skyrim. So that's my only kind of brush up against modding since I've left, is that I've been interested in the mods, but not in the modding of
Right.
Skyrim. So that's as near as I've got since then. Um,
All right. Well, last question here, important question. Who would win in a battle between Fourth Age Dale and the armies of Alfred the Great in the 9th century of Wessex?
well, uh, you did give me a little bit of a warning about this question, and I've been thinking about this, and I've come to the conclusion it would be Wessex, because Wessex were real.
Okay, that's fair enough. Fair enough.
But no, I mean, uh, Count here is referencing my shall we say overindulgence in the creation and modding of the Dale
Dale,
in
this has sort of been a bit of a running joke, at least as I've been aware, that your favorite faction is Dale. Dale gets all the good things, and if you look at like the way Dale is represented in the mod, um, they get some good specialization buildings. They also get a whole bespoke tree of buildings entirely to them, which is like I think innovation buildings is what we call it, right? So they get all sorts of things
yes,
hidden in
guilty,
there.
guilty. But on a serious point though, or serious as far as modding goes, that Dale is very representative of what the whole theme of the mod is, which is the dominion of men, that men would adapt and become
Hmm.
something more, that Gondor was stuck in its past, and these others were stuck in the past, but the Fourth Age, the one representing mankind being adaptable and going forward, was Dale. So there is a kind of a justification for it.
Sure, sure. Even if it does mean that we are essentially mortal enemies by virtue of our various Fourth Age favorite factions.
Yes.
But anyway, thanks again, Master of None. It's been great to talk to you, and maybe we'll have you back again if I can think of anything else to talk about.
Oh yeah, thank you. I've enjoyed it very much. And again, a big thank you to everyone that's played the Fourth Age over the years. I don't know what the total downloads are, but I know that it was certainly well over 200,000 back in 2007, 2008. So for all those that have
Wow.
played it, thanks. It means a lot, because if we made it all and one person played it, it would be
Right.
pretty depressing. So thank you for your support.
All right. Thanks very much.